Last years of the 19th century, that human affairs were being watched from the timeless worlds of space. No one could have dreamed we were being scrutinized as someone with a microscope studies creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. Few men even considered the possibility of life on other planets. And yet, across the gulf of space, minds immeasurably superior to ours regarded this Earth with envious eyes. And slowly and surely, they drew their plans against us.
Broadcasting live
from a tiny studio somewhere in North America.
This is Dark Matters Radio Live. And now I give you your host,
the silverback of ufology.
Here's Don Ecker.
And gang, welcome to a brand new edition of Dark Matters Radio, right here, only on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. And as per usual, joining me tonight is Mr. Gerry, Mr. Mark Center, my two esteemed co-hosts. And tonight should be a very interesting show. You know, several months back, we had a gentleman on from that actually Gerry and Mark had both bumped into on YouTube. Manny, okay, who is an awesome freaking researcher who's been examining the whole disclosure business, the names now that are most prominent in disclosure. People like Luis Elizondo, people like Hal Puthoff, people like, well, I could go on and on and on. What's the use? They've been around. Well, Puthoff and people like Kit Green, they've been around forever. They're sheepwash spooks, okay? All worked in or with the Central Intelligence Agency on various projects. And for some reason, UFOs now, of course, UAPs got them interested. Hang on a second. My little Joey here, my little Sheltie, finally is coming around for dinner. There you go, buddy. Had it ready to go. So anyway, we had Manny on a couple of times, and always some fascinating information. And then, a week or so ago, Gerry came to me and he said, hey, he said, there's this other guy out there, he said, who knows Manny. As a matter of fact, he does some of the same stuff. And he's called Red Panda. What's the rest of it? Koala. Yeah. Red
So I heard that name.
Koala.
I thought he was like some sort of like wild animal sanctuary guy.
I thought maybe he was trans there for a minute. Is that your pronouns? Is that but anyway, he said he's been doing a lot of this background research too. And he said, I think it would be great to have him come on. And I said, hey, that sounds like a heck of an idea. Then Mark told me, he said, yeah, he said, I've seen him on the web. I've seen him up there on the web. So when I wrote up the promo for the show, Skywatcher, our executive producer, got back to me and said, oh, yeah, I know that guy. By the way, tell that guy that if he's ever interested in possibly doing a broadcast, put him in touch with me. And I said, I'll pass that word along. He said, it should be a great show, Don. And I said, okay, we'll find out. So tonight, that's what we're doing. And
I'm curious, when he told you that, Don, did he say anything like, hey, Ma, I'm doing a show? Anything
No,
like that?
no, that was right before,
Right before you said
not
it.
after. So anyway, Chanel, bring on our guest, Red. Red, I'm going to call you Red, if that's okay. Is that okay?
Your mic's
Your
muted.
mic's muted. Your
There we
mic
go. There
is
we go. There
still
we go.
muted.
There we go. Can you hear me?
There you go. Yeah.
Yes, you can call me Red. Yes, I'm not transitioning or anything. It's okay, so people always ask me, what's up with the name?
Hey, Red. That was a joke.
Yeah, yeah. Well, people are curious, like, what's up with the name? And I do have my little red hat, my red panda hat here. It's just two animals I liked. When I first got into this in like 2018, 2019, everyone had like UFO in their name, or like UAP or like disclosure. So like I didn't want to be like Disclosure Josh or like UFO Josh or something like that. So I was like, oh, well, I'll just pick two animals that I like and I'll
You
just
see
put them
my
together.
name?
Silverback.
Yeah, well, that's not
Silverback
what
of
I call myself.
ufology.
That's not what I name myself.
But yeah,
Anyway,
nice to be here. Nice to be here. And I know Gerry from Twitter and stuff. And yeah, I'm excited to be here. Talk all this UFO disclosure stuff.
you know Gerry?
Yeah. We've been. He's been
I'm
in a space or
sorry.
two, and
I'm very sorry.
Yeah, we did it. We did a chat together on whose show was that?
I think it was just a space on. It might have been MySpace or Chupacabra space, but yeah, you'd hopped in, or maybe Logan's.
I think Chupa was hosting it, and I met you and I met them, and I was like, you got. I enjoyed talking to all you guys.
Oh yeah, it's fun. And we do have a specific beat that we kind of cover, as you mentioned. That would also Manny, who I think he's a great part of the community and whatnot.
I love that guy. I really do.
We kind of cover some of the darker sides of this whole disclosure thing. It gets pretty nasty for some people, and basically what we've come to learn. And I guess maybe it would be helpful if I give my little backstory of how I came to where I'm at with all this stuff. So 2017, right? I was always into history and stuff, but I never really came across the UFO stuff until 2017. And I graduated from college in like 2016, and I wanted to do a Cold War history channel. So, and currently my channel is down, but I am on Rumble and Odyssey. Or no, not Odyssey. Yeah, Odyssey. No, BitChute. Sorry, I'm on Rumble and BitChute. Um, so look for it there. And originally I wanted to make documentaries like Cold War history documentaries. So like Chilean coup, Guatemalan coup, right? Like these kind of like hour long, get as much information as I can and kind of present it. I don't really show my face on my documentaries, and I feel like that kind of helps with the like immersion. And I try and find as many like old historical clips as I can. Um, and then basically the 2017 stuff happens. I was already saving up for a PC to like start editing and whatnot. And I was just like, basically, as soon as I saw the David Fravor Tic Tac interview on Tucker Carlson, I remember it well. Basically, just every day since then, been obsessed with this subject and learning more and more about it. I definitely think there is something to it. I think there's a non-human element flying around our skies and whatnot. It's been doing it for ever. But I do think also with this current thing, and so I was kind of fortunate. I started making my videos. I did videos about like Tom DeLonge, right? Like he's an interesting character. I went through and I got all of his statements he had made because he was kind of a central figure of this whole 2017 rollout, and I put it all in like chronological order, right? So like so people don't have to watch all these interviews. And then I did a series on Colares, which I think is a very fascinating UFO flap out there in Brazil in the 70s. And then I did a 3-part series that was kind of my take on the whole like Project Sign, Project Grudge, Project Blue Book thing. And I think it's actually really good. I mean, of course I do, but yeah, it's like 6 hours total, right? So I was always interested, always felt like I was part of the cause, like even early on. And then something that, and this kind of ties into what me and Manny talked about in Chupacabra and others, is what I learned was there's a very hardcore narrative control element actively today. And it's like, it's so dumb that I even have to say it's like, obviously there would be, right? Like, and fortunately, like a lot of my research into the old historical stuff really helped me recognize patterns of like, oh, that's what's happening here. Like this is happening there. And basically what I learned was it almost seems like, and every day it feels more and more like it, that there's a big like undercover Scientology op going on amidst this whole thing. And
That's what it feels like. I agree.
yeah, and it feels a little, yeah.
Look, I've been doing this UFO research. My wife and I published for over 20 years UFO magazine, which was the magazine of record in this field. Magazine itself started in 1986. I came on board in 88. Now, my wife is a journalism graduate and had been a working reporter. I am a medically retired criminal investigator.
Oh, nice.
Okay. So when I went into this, it was with the idea to go strictly for the facts. Now, as a result of that, over the years, I have met and got to know practically anybody that's anybody in this field. And one of the people that I knew prior to his death was actually quite a famous individual in his own right, Ingo Swann. Now,
wow.
if you know who Ingo Swann is, Ingo was the man that designed the protocols for the Stargate program, okay, remote viewing. Now, I did a lot of, and incidentally, Red, my major in college was history. Originally, I wanted to be a history instructor.
Nice.
So you two have a lot in common.
Yeah, I had a lot of conversations with Ingo, and one of the things I discovered from the days of SRI, if you know anything about the history of this field, you know that in the mid to latter 60s, the CIA became very concerned about a gap, psychic research, okay, that they were going balls to the wall for. You know, a decade earlier, it had been a missile gap. All right. Our rockets were blown up on the pad. The Russians were putting satellites in orbit. So now the psychic thing. Well, one of the people that got involved in this was Mr. Dr. Hal Puthoff. Now, as it turns out, Hal Puthoff had been a Scientology member. One of the stars at SRI, a guy by the name of Pat Price, allegedly one of the most gifted psychics in the world, was a closet Scientologist. Now, if you know anything about your history, you will know that after L. Ron Hubbard, who created Scientology, died, his wife, okay, continued on with the group. As it turned out later, after the IRS and FBI became involved, Scientology was at war with the federal government. And guess what? After Price died very mysteriously, it's believed actually he may have been assassinated. Guess what they found when they raided the offices of Scientology? All kinds of documents from SRI that Pat Price had covertly fed them. In other words, the son of a bitch was a double agent. Okay? So, yeah, you're right. Scientology is all through that. Now, my question is why? Do you have any thoughts on that?
On why they were doing that back then or today kind of thing?
Any or
Oh, well, both.
even
Well,
now?
yeah, let me
Whatever.
just elaborate on all that too. Because, yeah, so, and that's great what you were saying there too, because it kind of ties into some stuff I learned today. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Ron Pandolfi. I'm sure you are, being in the
Of
field for us.
course.
Well, one of my friends just got back from a trip with him, and he had said that um, Ron Pandolfi told him that Hal Puthoff. So, well, I think what you're referencing partly there is Operation Snow White, which was the largest infiltration of the U.S. government ever by any force, and it just happened to be Scientologists in the 70s. They were in over 30 countries. They had 5,000 agents. They were in the Coast Guard, the IRS, FBI, all kind of doing what you were saying with Pat Price, like feeding information back to the church, monitoring how the church is being documented there. Well, he said that Hal Puthoff actually directed Operation Snow White, which to me honestly kind of tracks. Um, And yeah, so and back to what you're saying too with that SRI thing, it was even more than that. I think like there was up to 14 Scientology clears in the first remote viewing class of SRI when they started all that stuff. A lot of Scientologists were there. A lot of people don't even realize like a lot of those protocols. And you know, L. Ron Hubbard stole a bunch of stuff from a bunch of other people too, right? It's all kind of like an amalgamation of like Thelema and Blavatsky and even older stuff, but still, like, there's no denying. And during that time, you could find documents from I think Pat Price and Hal Puthoff, both like proclaiming like how great Scientology is and whatnot. Um, so yeah, there's definitely that, like the whole remote viewing thing. And I know there's plenty of people who are like into remote viewing who aren't into Scientology, but you can't really separate the connection between those two. Now, as far as the modern day stuff goes, you know what I mean? Like even like Lou Elizondo, somebody like Lou Elizondo, he calls Hal Puthoff his like mentor and like his kind of like almost like a fatherly figure when you hear the way that he talks about them. Um, and yeah, and something kind of like it's kind of like Lou Elizondo's whole little arc, if you will, his whole little rollout is almost kind of like Scientology in a way where it's like at first we were told he was the director of this program, right, that looks at objects in the
ATIP,
sky. Yeah,
ATIP, yeah.
and
Which
now we're seven.
we
Yeah,
find out that's bullshit.
we found out that's bullshit, and now we're 7 years in, and we're learning that actually he was remote viewing with Hal Puthoff, right? Like it was never part of his like rollout initially. Now we learn that he allegedly has psychic powers where he could shake the bed of a terrorist in Guantanamo, you know, and with Hal Puthoff from a remote distance, right? So it's like they're slowly letting you in on like the real secrets of like what's really going on here, I think, and that's kind of an example of it. Now tying it kind of back to what happened with me and Manny and stuff and Tupa and whatnot. I noticed basically what I learned over time and after witnessing this community, and again, I was kind of inoculated from the access game, and I'm sure you guys are kind of familiar with it too. Of if you want to get certain people on your shows, like you can't ask certain questions, kind of thing. There needs to be, and it's very weird, especially for a subject like
That's why
UFOs.
Don Ecker is persona non grata with a lot of those assholes.
I bet. And Don Ecker is a perfect example of like you and some of the project not Project Sign, but that Sign working group in the 90s. Like there's a whole like Jan Aldrich, I think is another name that comes to mind where it feels like you guys, which were a great resource of like 90s UFO research, like nuts and bolts stuff, have almost been kind of like iced out and persona non grata by the greater disclosure Hal Puthoff's, Lou Elizondo's, right? Like you would think there would be an easy collab. You would think Don Eckert, Jan Eldridge, people like that would be all up in the mix, and they're really not, which is kind of a red flag, I think. But what we learned was basically not only is this narrative control thing, but if people step out of line or they get too close, we saw really what could only be described as fair gaming, right? And I think Manny was on here; he told you about it. I've seen someone just to run through some of the craziest things I've seen. I've seen people, and mind you, it's like I have direct evidence of Hal Puthoff and Lou Elizondo being connected to these like online troll networks that basically if anybody questions Lou or does anything bad about Lou, they dig up all this dirt they could find about this person and their family. I've seen them pull criminal records for people's family. I've seen them hack family members' Facebooks and put like they died, like a threatening thing. I've
Jesus.
seen, yeah, I've seen they've also one of my friends, Chupacabra, he got hit really bad because we're super vocal about it. There's this like almost a lot of the UFO media landscape. Very few people talk about this because there's this like implied like silence that they do, and I think it's because people are kind of afraid they don't want to deal with it, which is just ironic because we're supposed to all be for UFO truth, right? But like people are afraid to ask Lou Elizondo questions. It's like no, that's not how it should be.
Well, Lou Elizondo absolutely avoids me like the bubonic plague.
Oh, I bet.
I
Yeah.
met not face to face, but via telephone call. I had a very good friend, longtime friend, very well known public figure who passed away a year ago in January, Tracy Torme. He was the guy that gave the world sliders. He was one of the principal writers on the first couple of seasons of Star Trek: The Next Generation. He wrote he wrote the screenplay for the Travis Walton story, Fire in the Sky.
Oh
Okay.
wow.
Guy was very much into the UFO field. We knew each other since about 1990. And when Unidentified, the television series that was running on the History Channel, I found out about it. And of course, I watched it. I watched every episode. Elizondo was one of the people very prominent on that show. And Tracy called me up. This is a couple of years ago. And he said, hey, Don, he said, do you know this fella? And I said, no, I don't. He said, well, and then we chatted about the show. He said, well, I'm going to try to track him down. I want to get to meet him. I said, okay, Tracy, that's great. So anyway, he did. And he got back to me. And he said, I told Lou he ought to do your show. And I said, well, thanks, man. I said, you know what? I'd love to talk to him. Check with him, find out if you could give me his number, and I'll call him up. So he did. And he got back and he said, yeah, he said he'd be happy to talk to you. Great. So about a week went by, and then I called him. And when I called him, he couldn't get me off the phone fast enough. He said, hey, he said, look, he said, something's going on here. He said, I'll tell you what, I'll call you this weekend. I got your home number. I said, okay, great. So the weekend came. I waited all weekend. Nothing. So I waited a few days and I called him back. Same thing. Oh, I'll call you this weekend. Okay. Never called me. So this time I waited 2 weeks and I called him back and he started to give me this song and dance. And I knew by then it was bullshit. Look, when I was a cop, I interviewed hundreds, if not thousands of people over the years. And you ask Mark or Gerry, they'll tell you I'm pretty good at reading somebody. Okay. I had to do it. And so I knew then that there was something rotten in the old smokehouse. Now, I've been very public about that. The guy lied to me through his teeth. And he knew. Now I can look at somebody and give them their due if they say, you know what, Ecker, I don't want to talk to you for whatever reason. Okay. I can understand that because sure as hell, a lot of people I don't want to talk to, but you know, but to string somebody along, and that tells me when somebody does that something inside wires are crossed, dude.
So just a little bit more information on Pudov. I've gone deep into Scientology, especially since YouTube kind of blew up on it and actually got more access, right? So I was watching these 3-hour long, back and forth and stuff. This Pudov guy was a OT8 in 71, very early on and very high up. If you're an OT8, you're in full bore. You're 100% a believer. So should it surprise us at all that the tactics played by the Scientology group are going to be played in this whole disclosure thing? Absolutely not.
Yeah, exactly. It makes sense. And I even had someone in a space today talking about how Scientologists had infiltrated like the Canadian trucker movement and stuff like that. They have their fingers in so many things. So they have so many front organizations.
Like, what a weird thing to go into. What do you think is their interest in that?
I think they're kind of, in many ways, they're actually kind of counterculture. Like Scientology knew about MK Ultra in the 50s and whatnot, and they are kind of hip to a lot of this UFO stuff. So I think they just try and latch on to any of those kind of fringe counterculture movements, and then they're able to kind of like over time slowly, which I think is what's happening in the UFO thing, right? Like, if you look at it, even separate of the crazy narrative control, there's this element where to me it seems like they're setting up all these different parts that are kind of Scientology belief systems without saying it's Scientology, right? So it's like we're far away, in my opinion,
trying to sneak people into Scientology.
Exactly. Like there's UFOs, right?
Which is making the joke, but they're trying to go in the back door.
They are. There's UFOs, right? There's things we can't see in the sky, right? And then now all of a sudden, though, this disclosure movement encompasses past life regressions, where it's a big Scientology topic. Leslie Keane, right? She comes out with the 2017 article. Ever since then, she's basically been doing a lot of past life regression stuff. Now we have kind of like psionics, right? And remote viewing are all kind of one and the same and kind of looped in with UFOs where, like I said, it's very different than dots on radar where we are and where we're going. And to what you were saying too, Don, with Lou, they were probably looking into you. And again, like I said, it's very weird to me that like you or people like Jen Aldrich or people like in
Well,
that kind.
look, I
Yeah.
got to tell you something you may not be aware of. Back in November of 91 and in June of 92, I broke 2 huge UFO stories on national television. One was the former Soviet Union's Phobos 2 probe that went to Mars and was, according to the Russian space agency, not me, their probe was rammed by something. Now that's a whole show in itself.
Oh yeah.
Okay, but that happened. And then in June, I broke a huge story once again on national TV, NBC, and then Larry King Live, CNN. This is before Larry went down the tubes of the the STS-48 space shuttle video, where it basically encountered a bogey.
You remember that
UFO.
Red?
Yeah, the first one I definitely do. The second one, I'm not sure if I'm gonna have to look that up after.
It's this, just to describe it for him, Don. It's that shot from a portal on the shuttle. I mean, from the shuttlecraft, that something went up into the air from Earth.
Oh wow! Yeah, no, I'm gonna have to look into that one. The first one I'm really familiar with.
It was fired. It was fired upon. This UFO.
Something up there in the sky was fired on.
Now, I went on Larry King Live to talk about this. I knew the producer, okay, and I had called him up and told him about this. And he had me go down to CNN in LA, and I went down, took this video down to him. Now, by the way, this video was from a direct NASA feed. All right. This was from the space shuttle. And I took it down. They looked at it and he said, "Oh my God." He said, that was awesome. He said, "Well, yeah, definitely want to have you on with Larry, but we got to have a skeptic on too." So originally there was Phil Klass, who was infamous in the field, but he didn't want to do it. So they got Jim Oberg, who was a NASA contract scientist. Okay. Well,
I'm familiar with him, yeah.
The bottom line is I ate Oberg's lunch on that show. Okay.
Jim Oberg.
To this day, he's still on Reddit threads to this day and stuff. And actually, I think he came across, because I did a video on Marina Popovich, who she talked about that Phobos thing a bit. This was the Soviet cosmonaut. She never went to space, but she trained.
That is who I brought to American television, was Marina Popovich.
Wow, yeah, cool. So yeah, I did a whole video about her and her husband.
I knew Marina.
Wow, that's amazing. We got to do a video about that at some point. That's cool that you.
But anyway, let me tell you what happened. So, at the very end of the show with King and Oberg, okay, we only took 2 telephone calls. Now, I don't know how old you are, Red, but if you ever watched Larry King, the show itself went around the globe on CNN. And they would take phone calls from everywhere, but only 2 phone calls were taken on that show. And they were both from NASA contract employees. Okay. And both of these guys covertly had involvement with this thing. All right. With this incident. One of them, okay, Bruce Maccabee. Do you know who Bruce Maccabee was?
Yes, and he passed away recently, right?
Yeah,
I think he did. Yeah, I did.
Maccabee, and I'm blanking on the other guy's name. Took this video to the Congressional Science Committee secretly. They were convinced there was warfare going on in space. Okay. They were trying to get congressional involvement. Now, the Pentagon, in the meantime, and NASA were ticked off. Now, we had a source, the magazine, had a source back in D.C. Okay. This guy, later I found out, he was probably a spook, but he worked for a defense intelligence magazine. And he called me up 2 days afterwards. And he said, since the show, what have you heard from anybody? And I said, not a bloody word, nothing. I thought we would get calls from news organizations all over the country. I said, not one single remark. He said, one thing I can tell you, Don. He said, you totally pissed off the Pentagon. And I said, I did. He said, oh, yeah. He said, you sure did. And do you know what they did? And I said, no, not a clue. He said, that live feed from the shuttle that you got that video from, it is now an encrypted feed. And since June, Red, of 1992, anything you've ever seen from outer space has been vetted first.
Wow.
Okay. Or
It's
time
not
delay.
live.
Wow. What an
Nothing
interesting
live.
part of American history and UFO cover-up history you were part. You basically caused them to have to pre-screen everything because you busted them on the live feed. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you have a voice in the national to international field. And they have slowly and methodically cut Don out. And that's why what I'm doing is getting guys like you and Manny, and I want to find more guys out there and start pushing up on these
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah, because it's like it's super controlled right now, and to what I was saying too with there's the element of like they're icing guys like Don and Jan Eldridge out, right? But they're also this element that I've noticed, this pattern where it's like they like to latch on to people who are fresh, right? Who don't have the historical knowledge and wherewithal, almost like they're naive to the game kind of thing. And even with people like Schellenberger, right, at these super high levels, like he's still pretty fresh. Like I think he was only in it for like a year or two when he did his congressional testimony, and I don't care who you are. I've been in it for what, like 7 years now? Like it takes like a solid like 3-4 years to even get a sense of like the landscape and what's real and what's not. And I see this disclosure group, the Lou Elizondos, the Halpudovs, they're like they're propping up these little channels, right? Like they won't go on Don Ecker's show, right? Legend here telling us about this, but they'll go on these like random small channels and almost like foster them to become big to where they kind of have control and they know they'll never ask a hard question.
They want control of the narrative.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Super hardcore.
Well,
and you got to think, why? Why would they be afraid of Don?
You've got guys like, as much as I like Joe Rogan, he's done a lot of good work, interesting stuff, right? That's why he can go for 3 hours.
But he doesn't challenge,
and you'll
does he?
kind of listen to the whole thing if it's somebody you want to hear from. He's out of his element. He doesn't know what to ask. He doesn't know the history. He doesn't know any of that stuff.
Yeah.
So while it's interesting to have Lazar on and Greer, oh my God, and have guys like that, he doesn't know what to ask. So Greer will only go on if I had a show, which I don't, and I had 3 subscribers, he'd come on my show because he'd think I'm a nobody, right? Oh, this guy, and nobody knows me. I've done work with Don since the 80s. And
Wow.
I was very involved in this thing for decades, but he's not going to know me. So possibly I could get him on, but why would you want to have a lunatic like that on? It's just a waste of time. They brought me into a skiff. Why would they bring you onto a skiff?
Yeah, and they already have like a whole, I'm sure you guys, we've all seen it. They have this whole like lineup of like people that once you're tapped into that little network, they, you get Lou Elizondo, then you get Gary Nolan on, and then you're going to get Diana Pasolka, and it's all kind of like the same names
because it's
running.
a safe space.
Yeah, it's all the same names kind of running, pushing the same kind of narratives, which also I think ties back into the whole thing of like, you'll notice a lot of them, they'll hype up Jack Parsons, right? Where it's like, to me, that just screams like OTO Scientology stuff, because he was either, like, I don't know. There's just a lot of that. You'll notice a lot of, there's a core lineup that they have.
I'll give you a little history lesson here. Okay. Jack Parsons, L. Ron Hubbard, and who was the other guy?
Aleister Crowley.
Crowley. Okay, they were all asshole buddies.
Literally.
Okay, back in the 40s, and L. Ron Hubbard borrowed some money from Jack Parsons. Well, let's say he borrowed some money, all right, and then he borrowed Parsons' girlfriend.
Yep.
Did you know that?
Yeah, I did. It's pretty. Apparently, he was super charismatic. I mean, if he built that whole cult, I guess apparently everyone was infatuated with him at the Jack Parsons house there when he rolled along.
Right. and then Parsons died under very mysterious circumstances.
Yeah.
Now, for you people out in KGRA DB Radio Land, if you don't know who Jack Parsons was, he was the guy that began JPL, the Jet Propulsion Lab. All right.
They even did a TV series about these people.
Yeah. Now, Parsons was also into fireworks. He loved to blow shit up. All right. And he had been doing it for quite a while. But there was a very mysterious, enigmatic crossover between Parsons, Hubbard, and Crowley, okay, where maybe, and hey, I wasn't there. I don't know this. This is information I've gleaned over the years. Maybe somebody put the hoodoo on Jack Parsons. And guess what? He was working on his fireworks. They blew up, tremendous explosion, and suddenly Jack Parsons was dead. Okay? Now, you tell me, was there something else going on there or not? So I just throw that out for a little brain fodder. You can think about that.
Back to your research, Red. Why haven't we heard hide nor hair of the punk rock bass player in a long time?
Tom DeLonge? Is that where?
Yep.
They iced him out, and they kind of even did this before with Joe Fromage. I'm sure you guys know. It's like they latch on to people, they use them, they milk them dry, and then they just kind of kick them to the wind.
But still, with socials and stuff, he could be out there. He isn't. He's done.
Yeah, what do you think he had do you think he had a come to Jesus moment about it all behind the scenes and realized that like he was kind of being used more than he felt like,
or he was forced out with a little cash or threats or something?
Yeah, maybe that too. I wonder the same thing about Grush. It seems like Grush came on, made a big splash, and is now kind of like taking the more backseat role. I think a lot of these,
from the Lockheed Skunk Works.
Yeah,
where in the hell's he at?
Oh yeah, that was one of the names that really got me on board too early on. Who was that guy? I even forgot his Steve Justice. Do you remember Steve Justice, the Lockheed guy who was part of TTSA? You never hear from him either anymore. Yeah, I don't know. A lot of what Tom DeLonge said, though, when you look back at it, it all kind of like lines up with Scientology lore, with what his insiders, who we now learn are Hal Puthoff and Lou Elizondo, were telling him about.
Does the egg guy and what his thing about the love thing doesn't really hook up with Scientology? It does with the hippie movement, who Scientology moved in on. But the stuff that he said or how they've dealt with him, do you think
there is a little bit, and I try and give everyone the benefit of the doubt, because Lou Elizondo has definitely. I really used to like Lou Elizondo, and then just seeing like the depths of depravity he is in. I don't want to taint everybody who comes out for me, but there's a little bit of that. Sure. But you got to remember too. I don't know if you guys saw this, and I clipped this, and that's what I've kind of been doing now since they got my YouTube down. I've just been clipping a bunch of stuff on X to make people think. It was after, and it was actually during the live Q&A for the Jake Barber special, is when Ross Coulthart said for the first time that I think Scientology knows a little bit more than they're letting on, right? And that was after filming this special with Jake Barber and the Skywatcher guys, who I've had good interactions with. They seem pleasant, but I also have had people who are ex-Scientologists tell me that some of the stuff Jake Barber says sounds very Scientology lingo-y, like psionics, and when you can do your psionic powers, you need to be in a state of like not hungry, not happy, not horny, not sad. Apparently that's very similar to Scientology clear.
All right.
But the biggest thing for me for that one was that Ross Coulthart, who's been in the field for 6 or 7 years, I've never heard him ever say anything akin to Scientology knows a lot about this, other than after he filmed the special with those guys. And he literally said it in the live Q&A. You can go look at News Nation. And you got to think, what conversations was he having in these past few months that made him have this point of view that he hadn't had previously? So, I don't know. I don't know.
Well, I think it all goes back to Pudoff. I mean, this does.
I think so too.
Yeah. And you'll notice they talk it down. Generally speaking, especially when all this broke, a small remark about Scientology would be made about Pudoff, but it was never fleshed out for the general public. Oh yeah, he was sort of involved for a short time. OTA, come on.
He was married in a church. He wrote a bunch of literature, and that's a great point too. There's this weird obfuscation where everybody has a different story. If you listen to Lou Elizondo and Hal Puthoff, he was sent there by the CIA to monitor them for their tech, which is another thing you'll notice. They never crap on Scientology. It's always this weird inverted affirmation of it, where it's like, no, the Scientologists were so legit that Hal Puthoff was sent there by the CIA. You hear from Jack Sarfati, he kind of repeats the same thing. And then, but really interestingly, and we broke this the other day in a space, Rick Doty, whatever you want to say about him, and this is confirmed, he did work for Hal Puthoff from the 90s to the mid 2000s, and Hal Puthoff has spoken about this too, right? So people want to say, oh, well, Rick Doty's lying. Well, we have Hal Puthoff saying that, and he actually enjoys Rick Doty's company.
And
he said in the 90s, I guess they were just bouncing back UFO stuff off of him with his knowledge base of ops and whatnot. But he had said that Hal Puthoff was an active Scientologist, during the 90s, which is a lot later than they say. And not just that, he said he introduced him to multiple Scientologists while he worked with them, which would have been impossible if he left the church in the 70s and was a suppressive person.
I don't think he's left.
I don't think he's left either. I think they know. I think they're a little smarter about their branding. Although not that much, right? To the Stars is literally an L. Ron Hubbard book. They can't help themselves, but yeah, I think
most of the people who are that high up, when they leave, they go public. Like the actor guy was an OT6 or something. He went onto the documentary. He did shows on TV because you put in so much time and money. Maybe you're pissed off, but you go public when you're that high and you leave.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very casual. His relationship is very casual. It seems like every time it gets spread up.
Yeah, right.
I'm hoping to, and like you said, there has been a Scientology explosion kind of on YouTube, and I was kind of bummed. One of my favorite guys, I recommend people go look him up. He passed away recently. His name's Doug Kramer. His channel is called Dazed But Not Confused. It only had 10,000 subs. But what I liked is because a lot of the ex-Scientologists, to me, it almost seems like they get cartoony with it, and he would come at it with, he had all this historical knowledge too about Blavatsky and Thelema and the occult and the ways that they were hypnotizing people. And here's an example of what I mean when I say I like this guy's stuff, right? A lot of Scientologists will make fun of, former Scientologists will make fun of their whole anti-psychiatry stance, but this guy kind of explains it even better, where L. Ron Hubbard knew about MK Ultra in the 50s. And it wasn't just a broad Scientology thing. There was specific people, one of them being Jolyon West, who was a big MK Ultra scientist akin to Sidney Gottlieb, who we know Sidney Gottlieb was friends with Hal Puthoff. So there has to be an acknowledgement, I think, of not what they're doing right, but they're not just a cartoon villain. They hypnotize people. They know how to they know all the MK Ultra mind control stuff. They know how to put people in trances when they're doing their auditing and stuff like that, and give people, and this is something I've talked to a few ex-Scientologists, they have real, if you didn't know you were being hypnotized, you would think you were having some kind of crazy esoteric experience, right? And they know how to manipulate that with a bunch of people. So
a revelation of some sort.
Yeah, and that's why when you see people like Tom Cruise, when he was on Oprah and stuff like that, they literally look like they're on drugs and stuff, because they get this euphoric high.
High on crack.
They get this euphoric high from some of the auditing practices they do, which is all just kind of MK Ultra mind control tactics. But if you're not aware of that, it seems like you're talking to God. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right. Interesting. What are you working on now? Well, maybe not now, but recently.
So actually, I'm curious to see what you guys all think about this. I'm really into the New Jersey drones, and it was actually kind of weird to me. It almost seemed like there was a little bit of a psyop where, as far as I'm concerned, and I'll say, while this was all happening, especially during the heat of it, I interviewed, I think I can say safely, not maybe the most, but definitely up there. Anytime a video went viral, I tried to find the person and I'd do a little Twitter space with them. So I interviewed a bunch of witnesses of some of these really major viral videos too. And there was a lot of weirdness about the whole thing where, and if you look at the statements from the politicians and whatnot, I think there's something definitely anomalous going on there. So I do have my New Jersey drone documentary that I'm waiting for YouTube to get back to me. We've been in this like back and forth, and I don't want my biggest fear is I'm going to put my New Jersey drone documentary up, and then someone's going to put it on YouTube, and then YouTube's going to give me back. So I'm trying to give YouTube a little bit of chance to let me back before I do that. But I do have a documentary on the New Jersey drones and it's only part one of multi-part. And then I do have another one that's kind of in the chamber. It needs a little bit more work, but on Spielberg and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which will be fun because like since I got into this whole Scientology thing, I haven't really done a good historical video in a while. Like my video before this was about Lou Elizondo, and it kind of ties into this whole thing. So yeah, basically coming up, I got New Jersey drone doc and the Spielberg Close Encounters doc.
What's your overall look on that documentary?
On the Spielberg one or the New Jersey one?
No, the New Jersey one.
Yeah, basically. So I go up until I cover. Well, are you guys familiar? I think these drone incursions have been happening, and people will say what they want about Corbell, but I think some of those leaks he got from the UAP task force, like the USS Omaha footage and stuff like that, there's this through line, and I don't know what it is, if it's China or non-human intelligence. I kind of lean NHI, but yeah, basically. So I cover a lot of the previous drone incursions. There's also another big one. I don't know if you guys remember, like 2020 in Colorado. Very similar event as to what happened in Jersey.
I was just going to mention that the drone situation apparently happened in Colorado, and that kind of made a splash, and then it quickly went away.
Yes, okay. And it was very similar too.
I was very fascinated by that. And when the Jersey thing happened, well, not just Jersey, it hit New York, it hit Pennsylvania,
everywhere.
Well, to begin with, I never believed and of course this was under the Biden administration. I never believed for a second that they didn't know what the hell was flying around. That just didn't make sense.
Okay?
Yeah. Do you know what kind of stuff you could put on some of these big commercial drones and drop it, and what would happen? This would freak people out if they knew about that. And the fact that he said, "Oh, gee, we don't know what that is," bullshit. Okay, I'm calling bullshit on that right up front. And then I thought, well, Trump will finally come forward. And what did they release? The FAA is aware of these drone flights. What the hell's that mean?
Exactly.
Who the hell's flying them? Okay. Well, is it a government thing? Is it a military thing? Are they testing out new technology? What? Okay. And of course, you never heard.
There's also this issue, and I use the Mexico flap Jaime Maussan from the 90s, where when people start to see stuff and the video cameras, in this case cell phones, come out by the thousands, you start seeing a whole lot of more weird stuff that's misidentified, fake stuff. And when this happened, it just freaking exploded all over the nation and all over the world. And it's hard to take the wheat from the chaff there, because just like in the 90s with Mexico, we were overwhelmed. And it's like, well, I don't even know what to think of all this now.
Yeah, no, definitely there was a lot of stuff that got in there that was like a lot of people are looking at for the first time. But there definitely was a lot of other stuff, like, and even if you take the statements like the Coast Guard count or some of these the FBI investigator statements, right? Like they didn't, or at least they're telling us they don't know what it is. But yeah, I'm curious for the panel, what is it? So you kind of gave it a little bit there, but compared to some of the previous flaps, right? Because to me, this is like the biggest UFO flap I've ever been living through. Well, how did it compare to, I guess, the Mexico one? And what was else in the 90s? Like what, Gulf Breeze and Hudson Valley?
Personally, my knee jerk is I wouldn't even really try to analogize it in that way. because of the billions of HD cameras, the quick way to share the stuff, the PC and cell phone software, all of this other stuff comes in now. So I'm not saying that there isn't some interesting stuff there. I don't know what was going on there, but you get inundated with garbage in and garbage out. Where with the Mexico footage, there was a lot of it, but it wasn't being shot by thousands of people, uploaded by thousands of people. You didn't have really good software back there because Don and I were involved. I talked to Musan a couple of times, had lunch with him, and maybe something weird was going on there, but you'll notice that Musan and these people don't, if I'm not mistaken, how Musan, all these grandma and grandpas of the subject, they never had much to say about this drone thing. They were pretty quiet about the whole thing.
It was weird, right?
Right. And they might have been burnt before. It might have been clearly a lot of people were seeing horse shit in the sky and saying that it was the ETs and stuff, right? So
well, I can recall I can recall when that whole Mexico thing broke.
Yeah.
It was July of 1991. Now, back in those days, now it's hard to believe, okay, how the technology has leaped forward, but people were using VHS camcorders.
Yeah.
That's what they were filming all these videos with. And I'll never forget, this was one of the first videos that I saw from that flap, was a UFO coming down from the sky, flying behind a building. Do you remember that, Mark?
Right. That was a little, that's perfect to bring that up because the initial ones were discs in the sky from 4 different cameras at the same time, supposedly. But then that footage there, the wobbly disc as it goes behind, that was after the big flap really was heating up, like maybe even a year after. That's a pretty good example of the drone thing. Is there some weird stuff there? Absolutely. However, the deeper it went, the more polluted it got.
Let me say this.
Yeah.
There was one more incident that happened that made a big splash at the time. The Mexican military, I don't know if it was the Air Force or whatever, had a flight of aircraft up, and on their radar, they detected a number of objects in the sky that they picked up on infrared and their radar. But these objects were invisible. They could not eyeball them. Do you recall that?
Right, and that was in 1993. So you see the process. I'm not saying that's phony. I'm just saying the process from 91, which was organic from folks who had their own cameras and stuff, and then they had the eclipse come through, and everybody was trying to shoot the eclipse, and that's where these came from. You go 3 years into it, and you have some obviously fake stuff, and then possibly some weird stuff like that. Kind of the same thing with the drone thing. Might be some cool stuff there, but now it's just so much garbage out there. So much garbage.
Now, Red, I wrote a paper about a year ago on the whole disclosure thing. Now, let me throw a name at you and see if you recognize this name. Gary Beckham.
No. That's not this Gerry, right?
No. Gary Beckham. Beckum. I suggest you go up to Amazon Books, and I suggest, okay, he's got a number of books up there on the whole UFO intelligence thing. Now, Beckham, until he disappeared, okay, had a fascinating website, okay, starlight.org. And he was in the middle and interfacing with everybody in the field. I'm talking about intelligence people, where he wrote these books. His first one came out called Spies, Lies, and Polygraph Tape. Now, if you know your history, you'll recognize that Rick Doty was a part of that, the polygraph thing. But he wrote several other books. One of them was on Ingo Swann, To the Moon and Back with Love, Quantum Strangeness, okay, and I forget now offhand what the other one is, but you can get them very inexpensively. And I haven't talked to Beckham in probably 12 years, 10 or 12 years. He just freaking disappeared off the radar. But he did some awesome work. Now, my paper, I referenced some of his stuff, which I'm going to have to pick up on the other side because we're right now at the top of the show hour. We've got to take a break. So, ladies and gentlemen, tonight, our guest, RedPandaKoala, okay, maybe I'll have him once again tell you why he's calling himself that. Gerry Cassell, Mark Center, and I back with more goodies shortly. Stick around.
I need to charge my phone.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
Are we alone in the universe? The most important question facing humanity is on the verge of being settled once and for all. The Mutual UFO Network has been at the forefront of this journey for nearly 50 years. Our members worldwide are dedicated to the research, documentation, and awareness that will shape the future of humanity. Won't you join us?
Are you looking to go on a faraway journey that is magical and mysterious, reaping on mystical legends? If so, then Mysterious Adventure Tours is perfect for you. Imagine a voyage to explore ancient mysteries of Ireland, haunted majesties of Scotland, or their chilling Birth of the Vampires in Romania. These small, esoteric getaways are limited and do fill up fast. So, go to MysteriousAdventureTours.com and book your trip soon.
You're listening to the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. We provide unparalleled coverage of trending news in the world of ufology, cryptozoology, and paranormal phenomenon. Whether you're watching our video live stream or listening to one of our audio programs, you are getting the best from world-renowned researchers and hosts, guiding you through topics the mainstream won't touch. Miss one of your favorite programs? No problem. Head over to the members area at kgradb.com for access to our massive library of award-winning content. Make contact, stay connected, only at kgradb.com.
And we are back.
Hey Don, he'll be. Oh, he's back. I just wanted to say it's interesting with this drone thing, especially nowadays. The drone thing kind of died out. We don't hear from it from the mainstream, nor do we hear about it to any great extent from the not so mainstream, be it X or Instagram or whatever, right? And regardless of what the people in power say about it, that has no bearing on the release of the information unless it's being pulled. But if hundreds of people are out there to shoot this stuff, it is, and I have no answer here, it's just a view. Why is it that after the drone thing and it died down, if there are still interesting things up there, we're just not seeing them?
Well, let me finish my thought that I had before we had to go to break.
Whatever.
All right, because I think it's whatever. I think it's important. It's germane to the conversation. But I ended up writing a paper on disclosure. Now, I took a bit of information from Beckham's books that he had laid out actually years ago. And basically it's this, going all the way back to Roswell, June, July 47. Okay. Whatever it was that crashed in that field in New Mexico. Okay. The military got out there pretty quick. And I was actually graced to literally discover an actual participant to that event. All right, down in Roswell. I'd taken a trip to Roswell for a number of reasons, but anyway, I discovered this guy who was visiting Roswell at the time from Texas, had been an original guy in the 509th, okay? And he was one of the people that went out on his squadron, T Squadron, to pick up debris. Now, this is interesting because he told me that he saw 4 bodies. 3 of them were deceased. 1 was still alive that he told me that basically had a short conversation with him utilizing the alleged ET's telepathy. All right. Now,
wow,
something was discovered down there. And this was part and is part of the overall secret. There is what has been described, and it was actually Beckham that wrote about this, a core secret that the powers that be will never let go. Because according to the information, it's so disturbing that it would adversely impact and affect the American and world population if it became known. Now, here's the other thing. Surrounding that core secret, and I'm sure, Red, you'll know what this is an SAP binder, a special access program, which means that unless you have a distinct, direct need to know, you'll never know what the hell's in the center of that. When it's SAP, it's a federal felony to even acknowledge that you know it's surrounded by an SAP, a special access program. So that was the tact I took. Now, I basically, when I was writing this paper, indicated several times where there seemed to be military activity of a nature. In other words, there was some shooting going on. And that could be one of the reasons that so much of this is still top secret today. And for these people,
and you mean the UFOs were shooting the humans? Sorry.
Shooting at each other.
Okay.
Shooting at military conflict in near Earth space. Okay. Wow. Do you ever watch the feed on the ISS?
Sometimes, and definitely I'll see it if something interesting happens, someone will clip it, yeah.
Do you ever notice how on the ISS feed, if something unforetold flies into the screen, they immediately lose the feed?
Yeah, I've seen that happen a few times.
Uh-huh. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean a lot of people believe it's ET? or do we have our own stuff up there, which I think is highly likely. And it's top secret. They don't want anybody to know about it. And I mean, I've got a lot of background on why that might be, and we don't have time for it here. But Red, I'm telling you, the whole disclosure thing is a dog and pony show. You know what a dog and pony show is, right?
Yeah, it's like all kind of fake. It's like a pipe dream kind of thing.
No, it's where the pony screws the dog in a show.
Oh, is that what that meant? I didn't even realize that's what that meant this whole time.
Gerry, they're talking about you.
Hey, man. One time at a party, man.
One time, man. I used a condom.
It wasn't my fault he was on video.
Yeah. Well, and I bet for you guys who've been around since like the 80s and 90s, it's like you're not going to get excited until like something big happens, right? Because you've already seen this before.
Of course.
Yeah.
Look, it's and I always beat up on Greer, right? And it's no coincidence that he's been left out and now he's everywhere. Now he's everywhere, right? Making all these grandiose claims. When Don brings up an SAP, why would, since you can't even talk about an SAP, right? Why would somebody involved in an SAP, a group or whatever, invite that prick into a skiff or anywhere else, a black site or whatever, right, Don? Because they'd just be killed. I mean, come on. It's so ridiculous, man. I can't get over it.
What's your read on him over the years, by the way? Where he started and where he is now, Greer? I feel like
it's the same. It's the same. Back in the 90s, and I told this before, I'll make it real quick. He's on ABC, and he's going to vector in the UFOs. He was doing it back in the early 90s, right? When it broke. He's in Nevada or someplace like that, and they see something up there, and he goes, it looks like a good one. Looks like a good one. And ABC sends a Jeep up there, and it's kids drinking beer.
Oh, wow.
That gives you an idea. Now, has he been shown stuff? Maybe Hal has been shown stuff. I'm not one to say that they have. I tell Don all the time, can I prove that all of the material from the Billy Meyer case is fake? I can't. I cannot, right? He could have had something happen and then he blew it into a cult. I don't know. But Greer has been saying the same horse shit for 40 years, and he's saying more of it now. He's pissed off that he's not involved. They just completely said, we're not going to involve this guy. Go bring your information from the skiff. All right.
Davy Crockett, king of the wild frontier.
Yeah, I'm not a fan. I am not a fan.
Yeah.
I used to have one of those.
Oh, nice. Yeah, it's a red panda fur version. But yeah, no, Greer, yeah, I do hear you. And it's kind of interesting now if you'll see with this Jake Barber Psionic thing, it's like they're kind of swooping, although they're kind of giving him credit, but it's kind of like they're taking the CE5 thing from him. Which is kind of interesting.
Look, I'm gonna tell you something. Over the years, I've thousands of people. Okay. Now, I was in the Army. I was in Vietnam. I was as far north in South Vietnam as you could go, out on fire bases. I've seen a lot of helicopters come in with supplies, ammunition, rations, you name it. I've seen them lower it down. I've seen them come in on Hueys, UH-1s. I've seen them come in on shit hooks. That's a Chinook, two rotor blades on that thing. Okay. And I watched with Gerry and Mark this bullshit video.
Oh, the egg one?
Barber, the egg video. Let me tell you what, Bubba. Ain't no way. That's bullshit. And Russ Coulthard, or however you pronounce his name, that caused me to suspect he couldn't find his ass with both hands, 2 dogs, and a hunting license.
He's completely
invested
in it.
Wow. Yeah, the rotor wash or whatever it's called, I always thought was interesting about that, how there's like no indication that there's a helicopter above it on the sand.
On whatever that was down below, because you can't tell even what that is. Worse than that, if that's the sound that you're hearing is not from the helicopter.
No.
Because when you're in the helicopter, and I've been in helicopters in the military too, And I'm telling you, you don't hear the wash. All you hear is that fucking engine right above your head.
So
you don't hear the
Red,
wash until you're on the ground.
Did you see the clip from the MUFON guy who was a helicopter pilot, and he just debunked the entire thing? If you haven't, he has to send it to you.
Yeah, send it to me, Gary, and I'll clip that up and put that out too. That's interesting.
Crazy.
Oh, the one that sent it to me. Yeah. I'll send it to you, Panda.
Yeah, it's great because he flew them, and he wasn't like me. He's calm, and he says, "Oh no, here's what's wrong with this clip," and he did that work.
So let's run with that, right? And let's run with it. It's totally fake. What do you think is happening here then? Why? And I've talked to Jake Barber. He seems like a nice guy. I actually kind of want to go out to one of their events just to see it with my own eyes.
Smoke and mirrors, buddy. Smoke and mirrors. Okay.
For who though? For what benefit? What's the motivating factor?
I made the observation years ago when Unidentified was running on the History Channel that on every episode of that program, hey, now they did have some good stuff in there. Okay, yeah. Don't get me wrong. I'm not knocking the whole thing. But by the end of each episode, they had one underlying theme. There might be something coming down the road, and this is, in a way, a soft disclosure to the American public. Because when it gets here, if it gets here, they don't want everybody shocked to their core being. Now, that's possible. Maybe at the time it is possible. But the other thing was these guys suddenly expanded their horizons with all kinds of goodies that you can invest in. You guys remember this, right?
Yeah.
You can invest in TSA to the stars. And
build a rocket ship.
That's when it hit me. This is bullshit.
But Don, you're forgetting one thing from some of these people in the TSA and associated security. Remember, it was all about security. We have to be in on this so we can secure the earth, it was all about the military complex, that whole thing. Yeah. You can't take that out. The money is huge. Oh my goodness, look, something's going to come in. And it could be something like the meteor thing, right, from the movie. But in this case, it's UFO instead.
Oh yeah, and they all are. You can see a lot of them already kind of have these little orgs like set up almost to get the contract when it goes out, right? Like
absolutely.
Even UAP Disclosure Fund and Americans for Safe Aerospace. And I do like Ryan Graves, and I do think something like that needs to be made. But even at the congressional hearings, right? It's almost like an infomercial type vibe where some of the congressmen are talking about like, hey, don't you have Americans for Safe Aerospace? And Ryan Graves is like, yeah, I do. It's great. It's like, okay, you guys.
And that's
are all
really what it
together.
Really all comes down to is I think the reason why these guys want to do soft interviews and start new things, and you see too much involvement of the government. Too many of these guys making whistleblowers are still working for the government, that it begins to really come off as a dodge. It really comes off as a money-making thing. And that's all I see now. Whenever I hear Lou Elizondo or these guys, I just hear guys that are just trying to sell whatever it is they're trying to sell for money.
Well, when I was in the Army, I had a top secret clearance with a crypto access. Now, what that meant was I didn't have a need to know unless it was in the course of my duties, but I had as high of a security clearance as you could get, okay, as a military member, as high as you could get, which didn't mean shit if you didn't have a need to know. And that's the operative phrase, a need to know. Now, a lot of these guys, like David Grush, okay, I got to say, when he did his testimony at Congress, I was pretty impressed with what he had to say. And Gerry and Mark and I have all talked about this off the air, okay? He said something, and he always made it very clear. He had no firsthand information.
No
Everything
first-hand
was
knowledge.
second or third hand knowledge. All right. But he did say one thing. And as a cop, former cop, it got to me immediately. He said, somebody asked him, has anybody died? Has anybody been killed? And he said, yes, they have. Not one dickhead in the Congress followed up on that. Okay, not one said, well, who, what, where, when, why?
Right, yeah.
Which the first thing I would have asked, okay, because if this thing is lethal, okay, in certain circumstances, I want to know about it. Well, then Gary Nolan comes along. And I don't know quite how I feel about Nolan, but he has said that every pilot that has had a close encounter with these things, particularly in the air, have suffered effects from it. I'm sure you guys are all aware of that.
Yeah.
What's the story on that?
No question.
Nobody's talking about it.
Yeah. Also,
crazy.
there's a big picture here of, let's take all this disclosure stuff here and all of these people who are involved, okay? And let's say that that's just going to spin around like a stew. Does that really matter in the big picture thing if you have billions of HD cameras everywhere, on the sides of buildings, in taxis that show a meteor come in freaking Russia that we had never seen like that before? Bigfoot, whatever. Does this mess over here actually keep us from releasing possibly extraordinary footage? Where is that footage? I'm not saying that there isn't some interesting footage, but I'm looking at extraordinary footage, right? Because we have so many cameras pointed to the sky that are hooked to computers with nobody on it, that are on 24/7 and such. I'm not saying we should be awash in this, but it doesn't matter what these guys are doing, really, to at least get some footage that's like, oh my God.
You know what I want to see, Mark?
What's that?
I want to see some good footage of the crawlers out in the woods. That's what I want to see.
Okay, the cryptids or whatever, because those cameras are everywhere too, right? And even with Bigfoot, I've seen some interesting Bigfoot stuff, but it's so polluted. You would think with these hundreds of thousands of cameras that we could finally get something like, wow, I have no idea what this thing. That Skinwalker Ranch is a perfect example. There's all sorts of horse shit that's going on out here, and we have cameras everywhere. And then we look and they go, "What the hell is this? What the hell is? Oh, he got a thing on his head, and it might have almost killed him, but we're still allowing folks out there." It's like, well, what are you talking about?
You're talking about the dude running around with the shotgun?
Yeah. It's a TV show. It's a joke. And it's like the public should actually take it over, right? Guys like you who could write about the stuff, and other people need to get out there with their HD stuff, put all this stuff out there, and just start combing through this stuff and find some Will Smith style Independence Day, reaching down to get his newspaper, and he looks up and he goes, "Oh my God."
They don't like me. They don't like me, buddy.
I can only imagine.
I want to do a transition.
Yeah.
What's that?
I can only imagine what Lou came across that made him not want to do the interview with Don. It's probably just like, he's like, oh,
I don't know, man. Don's just a big old teddy bear. The gorilla thing, silverback thing, it's just a play.
Well, it's not like we're going to discount everything the guy says. You can't, right? You can't discount everything the guy says, but he's never held up that. What's the guy with the dude who has the show with the journalist from Vegas?
Nat Corbell?
Corbell. Hey, Red, do you have a what's the thing called with the switch? Oh, the dead man switch. Do you have a dead man switch?
Oh, yeah, that's
Red?
such a bullshit.
I actually don't. Yeah, it's funny.
Well, you should.
Just say you do, just like they did, because they're obviously lying. Because
there's a lot of theatrics, right? Or did you see
Right,
when he
right.
was mad at Schellenberger? Dude, when he was all at the hearing, like on the phone with Schellenberger, that his name wasn't in the thing. A lot of theatrics.
Right. And I'm not saying he doesn't have some real. I don't know, but it's so polluted with egos and everything else.
Well, I'll tell you, with Jeremy Corbell, okay, back in the day, I'm talking about 1989, I knew George Knapp, still know George Knapp very well. He was doing his TV journalism thing. And when the Bob Lazar story broke, okay, when he was finally identified, I knew John Lear, I knew Lazar's buddy Gene Huff, and I met Lazar. Been to his house several times, Bob Lazar's house in Vegas.
Oh, wow.
And I got to tell you, when I saw Jeremy Corbell do that documentary video thing he did on Bob Lazar, you know what I saw in that? And I was involved.
Someone dropped some acid before they made it. I'm telling you.
I was involved in the Lazar story almost from the get-go. When they arrested Lazar, okay, for aiding and abetting a disorderly house. In other words, they were trying to blame him for the whorehouse down in Vegas. Now, Clark County, you can't own a whorehouse. The rest of Nevada, yeah, but not in Clark County. And they tried to nail Lazar on this. Is after he went public, right? So anyway, I'm down there, and I went down to kind of help. Actually, another guy and I went down to try to help him out any way we could. Me being an ex-cop, this other guy had been a cop too for a while. And we all know that Vegas was having a political election that year with the district attorney. He was trying to get a big win. At the time, there was nothing bigger than Bob Lazar in the news. That went world freaking wide. Okay. So anyway, I'm watching Corbell's show. You know what I saw? Jeremy Corbell.
There was a lot of B-roll.
There was a lot of Jeremy Corbell in that story.
Yeah.
Now, I am not a presenter like that. I've never made a document. Well, that's not true. I did make one, but that's beside the point. I know you don't inject yourself. A reporter, and my wife will tell you this because she was a reporter, you don't insert yourself in the fucking material, okay? It's not about you.
And he did it to the most degree ever.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Half of it was literally B-roll of him on the phone.
I want your hat, dude.
It's fun. Did you get them on Etsy? Yeah.
You need to sell them on a store.
Here's something about that case I bang on, and maybe you could run with it. When they say, how did you vet Lazar? They say, well, we got other people who worked out at Area 51, and we asked them what color the walls were, what kind of tables they had. That's good work. Okay, great, fine. They never did that with his education, and that's with Knapp as well. They never brought him to MIT or any of these places. Spent the weekend out there and walked around, and they pointed out, start saying names because people are still alive who we went to school with. I'm sure instructors are too. They never did that, or did they do that and they didn't like what they heard? Nobody's ever done that. So you'll use that good process to try to back up that, yes, he was at S4, well, not S4, but out there, but they never did it with his supposed education. So you may want to run with that and say, what the hell? That's basic research.
I think these days Knapp even just kind of concedes that, like, he thinks Lazar was lying about his education. I think that's where we are with the whole thing.
But
that's not good enough.
Knapp has involved himself so much with Corbell and really with Lou and all this shit that his credibility is damaged now.
Right, but he had 30 years to do that basic journalistic research, and either he did it or he didn't do it, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of from your guys' era where it's like he's the one guy from your kind of era that kind of went all in on this current disclosure thing. Because like I said, like it's crazy that Jan Eldridge, people don't even know who that is, and
Right.
it's still alive and stuff like that. Or
He's on Facebook.
Yeah, apparently that's where it's all popping, where all the old '90s researchers are on Facebook.
Right. Well,
I've heard he's not a fan of the this kind of disclosure stuff, and a lot of people from that kind of they're iced out, but also they kind of don't even want to be a part of it. Is the vibe I get.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, why is Howe not really involved with that? Why are some of these people, Musan or whomever? Now, granted, they're older, and Greer, they're older, but isn't it interesting that they kind of, I don't really want to be involved with this. This is what you were hoping for. This is what you wanted, and yet they've stepped back. So it's interesting.
Yes.
Mark,
just to let you know, I think Mark's very angry.
You would tell us what you really think, okay?
I think
Don,
he's just
when you're
angry
in
and
this
old.
room, Don, they won't appear with you, so shut up.
Mark just sounds like some guy that's had trouble with his plumbing.
I've got tons of problems with my plumbing.
Well, that's the thing with this field, right? There's so much stuff where it's like there's so much stuff that's like exciting, but there's so much BS and so much stuff that just kind of makes your blood boil because we all want to see this subject go as far as it possibly can go, right? And then when there's all this like 40 minutes of B-roll of Jeremy Corbell in his bathroom floor with a purple light,
that's
glow.
the weirdest shit. I'm telling you, dude. I was watching that with my old roommate, and I'm like going, "Are we supposed to be high while watching this? Because this is fucking weird."
I gotta tell you, when I decided to immerse myself into this field, I did about a 6-month intensive deep dive into the whole UFO gestalt. Okay. And the people that were still alive, I got in touch with. People that were infamous and famous, people like Ivan Sanderson, Donald Kehoe, and nice. I could go on and on. Richard Hall, I did know. But Kehoe and Sanderson were both dead, but their writings were around. Mm-hmm. And buddy, I went deep into it. And my point is, this shit that we're experiencing right now has always been there. They've always had the clown show. There's always been a clown show.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Red.
This is not new.
So as a younger guy, what would be your view of not only the cases that have been blown out of the water but always come back, like the Dr. Jonathan Reed case and cases like that are clearly blown out of the water, but then the next generation comes in, much like flat earthers, and they just discount all of that information and they jump on board and say, oh yeah, the Reed case is completely confirmed and it's real. And it's like, what's an older researcher to do but just throw their hands up in the air and go, you moron?
Yeah, I bet. And I bet when you're getting told by people who are new to the field, they're like, you don't know what you're talking about, I could bet it could get frustrating.
But the information's out there. That's the whole thing.
It seems like there's a big segment of this whole conversation that banks on that banks on this like fresh crop of people to, because even Lazar's story, right, has a bunch of kind of holes in it. And we kind of discussed some of them. And and I think it kind of goes to what we were saying earlier too. Like they like this naivety. They like to interact with people who don't know anything about the subject, so they could just kind of peddle it. It's crazy. Like even with Lou, right? Like in his book, I think only 1 or 2 people have ever asked him about his remote viewing a terrorist thing. Right? It's just like they just go to people who don't even think to ask that, which is crazy. But yeah, the Reed one I'm actually not too familiar with, but I do know there's a few of these cases where it's like, yeah, it seems like it's kind of been debunked or whatnot. Yeah, I don't know. The grift.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like it's the nature of the Facebook short, the YouTube short, and you're watching this stuff, right? And when you go down that thing, I'm looking on there and I'm seeing all this cool AI stuff. But I know better.
Yeah, that's dangerous.
I've been around, but somebody who hasn't been around may look at that stuff and go, oh my God, I can't believe that this is actually happening right now.
Or like Billy Carson, right? Like people like that
Yeah.
who it's like, or the whole Gaia thing. Like it's crazy that these conventions like Contact in the Desert and whatnot, like
Right.
their whole roster is like all these Gaia people who I've like never even heard of, like David Wilcock. Well, I do know about David Wilcock, but
Well,
people like of
oh
that
my
vein.
goodness.
And it's
Steve
like,
Cambion.
yeah,
Hey, a shout out to Steve Cambion.
yeah, I like Steve Cambion a lot. But it's crazy how much it, and you know, maybe it's on purpose, but it almost seems like they get pushed so hard, right? And like their stuff is so BS. It's crazy.
Right. I used to go to those, and I had a newsletter called UFOs, Aliens, and You, and it was self-published, and I gave them away, never charged for anything. Gave hundreds of thousands of copies of this thing out. So when I'd go to those things, and I would hand those things out, and I would go into the dealer's room, me was said that I was a government plant because I wasn't accepting any money for my work, and I was a nobody.
Wow.
I was a nobody, and I just trying to do this work. I was very into it. Oh no, you're a government plant because you're giving this stuff away. Okay.
It is funny. We are kind of our worst enemy too at times, right? But there is a reason to be paranoid, and like I said earlier, with the stuff that me and Manny and Tupa talk about, like there are weirdo government plans in this field that do weirdo things to people. So you can't even really blame people for being suspicious. But yeah, it's unfortunate the whole ecosystem, like everyone's kind of on edge and suspicious of each other.
Yeah. Well, I just want to see good footage. Just vet some good footage and get it out there.
I've been so jaded with this. I laugh at that bullshit. They used to accuse me of being a CIA plant. They accused my wife of being a CIA plant. We were doing UFO magazine. Okay, whatever. Yeah. I'm waiting. I'm still waiting for the check.
Well, I got to tell you, the people that normally say shit like that up front, they're the one. It's sort of like the guy cheating, says my wife's cheating on me. You're cheating on me, is actually the one that's cheating.
Yeah. I've definitely seen that too, where some of these people who I suspect are Scientologists are the first ones to come out and point the finger, and like I mean, even Lou Elizondo did that, right? He there was a point in time where he was accusing all these people of working for Stephen Greer to like push a narrative, and it's like, well, buddy, that's kind of like what you do with all these other people, but like I've been accused of being paid for by Stephen Greer because I'm critical of Lou Elizondo, so definitely there's this element of like get out ahead of it, flip the narrative, and you know what I mean, kind of obfuscate.
Well, I got a question for you, Red. Okay, you've been doing this now 5, 6, 7 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, I know what Manny told us when he was on the show here a couple of times. Have you personally been threatened or suffered any ill effects from anything since you've been doing what you do?
Oh yeah, probably. I mean, well, I'm pretty sure they're the ones who got my YouTube channel taken down. One of the things that really bums me out is because like, not to be like patting my own back, but I mean, I kind of have a pretty clean record. Like, I'm not, I mean, there's not really much stuff you could find on me, but I do know they'll go around to the people around me, right, and try to make their lives uncomfortable and whatnot. I have had them post pictures of my family and whatnot, but that's like, it's kind of whatever. The thing that really gets me upset is when they go to people like who I've known for years or something, and then they'll like try and mess with their like mental health and their well-being.
Do you know who these people are?
Yeah, and me and Tupa and Manny have mapped it out, and we're all kind of working on our little projects about how to really expose this thing because it's such a tangled web of like different people. But yeah, I do know them.
It sounds really diabolical to me.
Yeah, and I personally have flipped probably 2 or 3 people that were inside of this group in this network, and we were able to get some really good information from them about the connectedness that Lou Elizondo has to these lower level trolls and stuff like that. Like Manny was here, he did the documentary about Lou. He got totally wrecked, and they went after his girlfriend and stuff like that too. Luckily, I try and keep my personal life as like isolated as I can. But no, they still have tried to find me, and they try to find where I worked and stuff like that. But luckily, I think I've been good at keeping all my stuff kind of quiet. But yeah, mainly for me, it's the YouTube thing and going after people near me. They went after my friend Tupacabra really hard in really gross ways.
Well, you basically do either a short or even a long documentary on these people with photographs, with testimony. Okay.
Yeah.
Point these people out. Okay. Let everybody know who in the hell they are. And see how they like a little sunlight on them.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we've been doing. And fortunately, their tactics have kind of gone down a little bit. But for a while there, and maybe you guys, I don't know if you guys talked to Jeremy McGowan. He'd be another good person to talk to. He was one of these veterans who he was on season 1 of Unidentified, and basically he started getting these red flags. He was one of the first people to say that Lou Elizondo's a remote viewer in like 2020 because he got brought in. He started seeing all these red flags. They were pitching his he had made this truck called the Osiris, which was like, you know how people every now and then they'll make a truck that's like UFO hunting with all these capabilities. Lou Elizondo was like lying about his truck to HBO executives to try and get a show. He basically like backed away from them, and then after that they fair gamed him. They all these little trolls that have direct connections to Lou were like calling his work, trying to get him fired, trying to get his security clearance revoked. And again, this is just one example of many. There's like I've seen this happen to media assets, to whistleblowers like him, right? A military whistleblower. He saw something in the 90s in the military and was on unidentified. And next thing you know, like this network of like hundreds of people are because they feel like Lou Elizondo. What it ties into is a lot of people, and this is to their credit, I guess, to Lou's credit, they think like Lou Elizondo is disclosure, right? And so anybody who like is critical of it, they're able to paint kind of like what we were talking about as like a plant or something like that. And I think that's how you get like seemingly normal people to co-sign like very like amoral behaviors and whatnot. But you should definitely talk to him too. He has good experiences with all this. He's a military guy like you guys, so you guys would probably kick it off.
So you've been into this for 7 years. So in the time that Lou and Corbell has been out there in this whole disclosure thing, can you point to anything with meat or of worth of disclosure that any of these guys have
No, and
released?
okay, so Lou, I like as much as I dislike some of his personal things, he did lobby Congress, right? And like we have Arrow now, and we have the UAP task force. That's definitely, I think, a step in the right direction.
Well,
And
right.
Yeah, and Corbell, I think like the UAP task force, he definitely had like Grush or somebody on the UAP task force who was leaking him these things, and I think some of that footage is actually pretty good. I know some people have like disputed some of it, but like the USS Omaha footage, the USS Zumwalt footage, I think is pretty interesting.
Well,
And these
they
are some
knew
of the, yeah,
Grush. They knew Grunt. Knapp, Corbell, they knew him before any of this congressional business.
yeah,
And they knew Elizondo before any of this congressional business. So if I were tasked to investigate that, that's the first thing I would zero in on. How did they meet?
agreed.
Right.
Okay.
How long have you guys all known each other?
Right.
That's another thing.
Exactly.
And what's your view now? I could throw some stuff out there, but when Lou released the chandelier and the flying octopus footage, it's like, what the hell are you doing? You're supposed to be somebody who's been vetted, and you do a Jaime Maussan and throw it out there and say, okay, we need people who have seen this so we can vet it. What's that about?
Well, and apparently it's even worse than that, and that's why it's like it's funny. The Lou lovers think I'm some hater, but I'm really trying to help them because apparently he told 2 different people that he was trying to make businesses with that he interviewed the pilots from the chandelier thing. So like a total lie, right? And then it was so bad that he had to come clean. And then even after that, he set it up like he was set up by somebody to discredit him, even though he's behind the scenes telling people that he interviewed the pilots, and his fans just kind of eat it up. And it's like, guys, you're being manipulated. This guy is lying to you, and then he's lying to you after the fact, saying he was set up. He's been telling people about this photo for years, dude. Like, so yeah, I think that was really, I'm kind of glad it happened, because that was a really cut and dry example for people to see, like, oh, maybe this guy's kind of full of crap.
Right.
That was crazy.
Or at least if he's gonna be, if the opportunities is there, there's a chance he'll take it. And that was an opportunity to get the cart before the horse, release it first. I released it first, which is a classic Musan move, and then say, okay, we got to look into it and see if it's real or fake. That's not what you do.
Also the element too of like that was a paid show, right? Like if I was at that paid show, I would feel manipulated. It's like, why couldn't he have shown this on the billion interviews he's done, right? This is supposed to be some secret knowledge that you paid for, and then it turns out to be fake. And then it turns out that he's actually been lying about this. And then after the fact, he lies to me even more as the Lou consumer, saying that he was set up. You know what I mean? It's just crazy.
Right. I had the same problem with Hoagland in the 90s when in those conferences, and I guess they're the same now, you pay extra money to go into a classroom setting, and they'll show, I went to one of Don's, but I didn't have to pay, where he showed some stuff on VHS tape. It was that long ago. So with Hoagland, we go in there and it's packed because he's like in his full power at this point. And it's 2.5 hours, and he's showing all this stuff. And I didn't take notes, but I went home, and as best I could, I wrote a thing up, and I got it onto CompuServe or something like that. And I actually faxed him a copy of it. And he was more pissed about me sharing private information that we paid $25 to hear than putting the information out. A little bit wrong, but it was somewhat within the realm of reason and he was pissed that I would share this private information. It's the same thing, right?
Yeah, messed up. And that's why all my stuff's always been free on YouTube. And, some of my stuff, I don't know if you guys have seen it or not, it's on Rumble now, but it's really edited. It takes a long time for me to edit these things. A lot of times people will just, they'll just kind of like talk in front of the camera, but I try and have a bunch of different cuts and stuff like that and make the music timed well and stuff like that. And I've always felt it should be free and stuff, especially something like this. And it's something like this, to me, that just my grift bells go off or my alarm bells if there's ever this kind of like paywall for information about a topic like this. Like if it was that important, like there shouldn't be a
how
hello. Yeah, it's crazy.
Well, this is a field set up for unscrupulous people. If you want to grift, oh brother, this is where you want to go.
It's the Wild West. That's another thing I've noticed. It's like this whole field exists in this like weird Wild West. Anything goes, right? Because it's been, and I do think there's a real phenomenon here, but the subject, and even in my videos I cover this too, and I'm sure you guys are aware of it. There have been intentional efforts by the government and other powers that be to make this whole thing a clown show, right? And in this clown show environment, people can do whatever the hell they want, bro. People are getting away with crazy stuff that in other industries and other fields, like they'd already be hit with like, you know what I mean, consumer fraud type stuff. But here you can just say, do whatever you want and sell it. And the sad thing is a lot of people who see things, right? There's a lot of broken people in this field, right? So it's almost like there's vultures and predators in a field of broken people that are just looking to like latch onto anything, and then it's just so easy for them to grift off these people. It's crazy.
I'm gonna give a very short example of people's unwillingness to be confronted with the facts. Back in the late 80s, 88 actually, first service, there was a guy out there by the name of Milton William Cooper, Bill Cooper.
Mm-hmm.
I knew Cooper from the get-go, okay? Now, I watched him expand his initial story to the heavens over a period of about 3 or 4 years. And the thing about him, the guy was, well, okay, not that I should make a big deal out of this, but the guy was a raging alcoholic, okay? Drank like a fish. Now, hey, I like to have a drink now and again, no doubt about it. But I don't sit down and drink a bottle of Chivas Regal in one sitting, okay, which this guy would do. Now, as his repertoire expanded, he began getting questions from people. Now, back in those days, there was a computer BBS system that circled the globe called the Paranet system. Are you familiar with it, Red?
No. Is that just like another internet thing on a satellite or something?
No. These were bulletin board. Wait, this is way before your time, I guess. But the internet had not yet begun to really blossom, okay, like it did in the early to mid 90s. This was BBSs. You would have a computer system set up, usually on dial-up modems, okay, but they were all interconnected. We had Paranet BBSs all over the US, in France, in Great Britain, in Germany, in Russia, in Japan, in Australia. And for the time, this was amazing. But anyway, okay, Paranet, Paranet, look it up. And the guy that began that system was a guy by the name of Jim Spicer. And I knew Jim very well. Well, make a long story short, Cooper put his first document on the Paranet BBS. I read it and I got in touch with him. And suddenly, as time went on, this began to expand. Now, back in those days, there were a couple of guys out there that were big names at the time. William Bill Moore, Jamie Chandra, okay? And Moore and Chandra were responsible initially for MJ12 and the MJ12 documents and the Snowbird documents. And Cooper originally verified this 150%. And then he began getting questioned and he turned on these people. Now, he did it with Moore, Chandra. He did it with Mike Corbin, very good friend of mine that ended up taking over Paranet from Jim Spicer. He did it with George Knapp. He did it with a lot of people. And ultimately, and John Lear is another important part of the story there with John Lear and Cooper. And eventually me, when I wrote an expose on Cooper, well, I ended up doing several exposés, including, okay, on my radio show then, 2 episodes where Cooper, I had audio tapes of him making a bunch of drunken phone calls to people that originally supported him, where he was threatening them with their life. Man. Oh yeah, this was some crazy stuff. Well, I exposed all of that. Then I ended up being on the receiving end. Now, I got to tell you, I faced off with elements of the North Vietnamese army in Vietnam. I wasn't really intimidated by a raging drunk, okay? You know, that was out there doing it. He ended up getting killed, Cooper, in a shootout in Edgar, Arizona with the police. It's a long story, but he got into a gunfight. I remember
this story.
Yeah, he got into a gunfight with the police and they blew him away. He shot a cop in the head, a Marine Corps veteran of Desert Storm. Okay, it was a sad freaking story. But anyway, today, 2025, as we do this show, his name and the book he wrote, Behold a Pale Horse, which I called Behold a Pail of Horse Shit, all right, is one of the biggest books in the American criminal system in prisons. Yep. Have you ever heard about that, Red?
Oh, yeah. And I wanted, probably not anytime soon, but I'll probably maybe have to talk to you because, yeah, I would love to make a video about him, just exploring his timeline because, yeah, he's such an interesting figure, right? And his theories changed over time, right? Like he was all in on the UFO thing, and then eventually I think he ended up being like, it's all fake, it's all a psyop. And yeah, hearing what you're saying here too, this is very fascinating. And yeah, people do love Bill Cooper today. He's yeah, his book's super popular, and yeah, I'm very familiar with it.
That's another view of the younger people, and I mean 50 and under, incarcerated or not, but especially incarcerated. It's like a gang almost. You read that book, and then they basically have classes on it and all that stuff, and it's built up to something huge. And then you have people on YouTube who I've seen, and I don't share this stuff with Don because he doesn't care, but I'll go into the comments and somebody will bring up Big Don Ecker, as I call him, and, well, who the hell is that, and what the hell does he know, not knowing any of the background.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that shit annoys the crap out of me. And I'd love it if you and Manny would just bring him in there so these people will hear some truth rather than all this bullshit.
Or at least true history. At least some true history.
Me?
Oh, we're not talking about you, Don. We're talking about some other guy that knows a lot.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, it'd be great if you did a show with him or did, whatever he wants to do, because he can be a curmudgeon, but he still has good information. So,
well, no, and he was there.
You have
for
not
a lot
lived
of
your life until you've heard him call somebody a son.
Yeah, no, I love this.
Sons of bitches.
One of my favorite little videos I ever made was I interviewed two guys from Operation Right to Know, which I'm sure maybe you guys are familiar with. Was it Mike Jameson and Ed Comerick? And that was kind of a fun little thing. I love getting the first-hand historical accounts from people.
Yeah.
You guys remember that Operation Right to Know from the 90s, the protest movement?
Did you forget who you're talking to?
Yeah.
Yeah, do you know who you're talking to?
I got pictures of that. I went out to JPL where they were demonstrating, and some workers, now this is no bullshit, okay, were so pissed off. Now, there was a lot of things happening then. The NASA was going back to Mars. Originally, they weren't going to put a camera on the probe, and there was a lot of crap. And by the way, that is an interesting story, what happened to that probe. But anyway, my wife Vicky and I are out there. We're taking pictures, talking to people for the magazine, and this car full of JPL employees came by with one of those super squirt guns and did a drive-by shooting at us with the squirt guns.
That's
yeah.
great.
Oh shit. Yeah.
Nice.
Oh yeah.
That's fun. Yeah, and those guys are still around. They're cool. I like talking to them. I like I like a lot of my stuff. Like I said, I did a video on Donald Kehoe, Marina Popovich, Nino Kulagin. I like all the old stuff, so I do like talking to people that were around.
Old stuff.
Sadly, most of the people who were more, let's say, believers in a generic way won't talk to you, I'm sure, because Hal and those people, there's just no.
Oh yeah, I would love to pick Hal's brain for like 4 hours and just get him to just go through his timeline of stuff. Yeah, probably never him, but yeah, and a lot of people passing away, like Bruce Maccabee and stuff like that. Even I wanted to talk to the Brazilian guy.
Yeah.
He passed away too.
I think.
Yeah, that was sad. So yeah, it's a bummer.
I got a Bruce Maccabee story, but I'm going to save it, not for today.
Okay. Because there's all these different theories about him too, right? Were you saying?
Oh yeah.
Either he was a part of the feds or he was a true believer.
He went over to the CIA every week to have dinner with them. I got this on my show, okay? Because I nailed him down. And but I don't want to destroy the story for another time, but
okay.
But yeah, Bruce had, let's just say Bruce had spook tendencies, okay?
Yeah, there you go. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, and I do see the producer in the back channel.
He would talk to people. You're just not going to get necessarily the truth, but he would talk to people. He talked to me a bunch of times.
Nice.
Yeah, I asked him about something that I knew for a definitive fact that he did, and his comeback was, "Oh, gee, I don't remember. I just can't remember."
I have no recollection. I have no recollection of that.
Oh. Well, yeah.
Well, guys, we are, let's see, we are at the end of the show. Red, stick around. Don't leave yet.
Okay.
I want to talk to you after the show.
Okay.
That's it for this week. Red,
yes.
It's been a
Thank
great
you, guys.
show.
Nice meeting you all, Mark, Don, Gerry, seeing you on camera. Yeah, fun times.
And guys, thank you so much. We'll be back in a week. But hey, don't forget, UAP Crossfire, Thursday evenings, beginning at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 o'clock Eastern Time, right here on KGRA DB, Digital
God bless
Broadcasting.
Sam and Dean Winchester.
Have a good week, guys.
I'll stick around here.